Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to, if not celebrate, then discuss for 10 to 15 minutes with Q&A to follow, the life and work of Matt Bunk. I am not Matt Bunk. I am Max Bink. A different guy. Born in an unknown year, in an unknown place to unknown persons, Matt Bunk rose from total obscurity to a certain kind of underground art scene notoriety in the mid-2020s. He was an installation artist, actor, director, sound designer, musician, choreographer, playwright, and poet. He used to say he had made one career from pursuing 6 at the same time. Probably best known for his work organizing the artist collective Address Book, which we will get into in a second, Matt's work strove to be always site-specific, surprising, semi-spontaneous, serendipitous, and social in the extreme. As a person, some people thought he was pretty funny. He is survived by a vibrant community of friends, partners, teachers, collaborators, and interesting acquaintances, totaling up to 130 people who may come to my funeral. I mean, his funeral. Again, I'm definitely a different person. But before we get to the fiber art installation piece called 130 People Who May Come to My Funeral, we have to backtrack a bit. Matt's unusually close relationship with death may be said to have begun in 2021 when he was a witness in a police shooting. This kickstarted a long-standing obsession with the legal and bureaucratic systems of death, with cultural practices and customs that follow death, especially violent and sudden death. Because he had been a playwright before, he tried to write a play to process his own trauma, the bystander guilt. But suddenly, words weren't enough. What was there to say in the face of something so massive, in the face of state-sanctioned murder, when 2 police officers shot and killed an unarmed man, and then were given paid administrative leave? What could Matt possibly have to say about that? So he started writing experimental poetry through the borough's cut-up method, borderline randomly chosen pieces of cut-up books collaged together until they seemed to suggest meaning. The thing about cut-up as a form of poetry is that it's a magnified reflection of what poetry is. Poetry, in Matt's opinion, is one of the furthest out points in the stepping stones of verbal abstraction. So you start with everyday speech, which is undramatic and largely unabstract, and there's essay, dialogue, song, etc., all the way down to poetry, with its inaccessible metaphor, inaccessible forms, unconventional, abstract use of language. Poetry is a vehicle to express the plain language inexpressible. So that poetry eventually cohered together with more conventional first-person narrative and snippets from months of researching into the structure of policing, mental health incarceration, and the American justice system at large. This experimental play was called Administrative Leave, and it became his process blueprint, give or take progress stalls from episodes of major depression. A few years later, in 2024, he returned to more or less normal life. He had a regular job working, ironically, for the county. He had stable friendships, a good apartment. He was known for having large, elaborately themed dinner parties that included little performances from artist friends. He was performing regularly as an actor and musician again. And then in the fall, there were a series of sudden work losses. A play got canceled before rehearsals began, he got dropped from a musician's backing band, things got rearranged, rescheduled, and suddenly he had a lot of time on his hands, so he thought, I'll just organize a house show myself for fun. Why not? A themed dinner party, but bigger. Instead of 3 or 4 poems being read or a little skit being performed, what if it's poetry and music and prose and short theater and maybe even visual art? I'll just do it in my apartment. Why not? Maybe project video art on the blank wall by the kitchen. So he got a few friends involved, people who wanted to read, play, act, cook, make collages, hang paintings, meet new people, help organize, and so Address Book was born. Address Book is a happening, somewhere between a house party, an immersive theater piece, a pop-up art gallery. It's a celebration across forms in social practice. So a typical show runs 3 or 4 hours and includes 25 to 35 artists, usually performing and showing work in 2 to 3 rooms at the same time. It's like a tiny festival. There's no fluff, We don't read bios, we don't have a curtain speech, we don't Q&A, there are no intermissions. People flow in and out, and there's very little division between artists and audience. The idea is it's a total saturation of art. After that first happening, called mysticism, a dress book picked up under its own sails. People were talking about it, people were asking when the next one was. It was hitting on something good. And then Jude died, violently and suddenly. We won't get into that too much here. But suffice it to say, am I allowed to swear? Suffice it to say, that was really fucked up. When Jude died, the world turned completely inside out. When Jude died, the world went gray. When Jude died, I felt like I did too. I mean, Matt felt like that. The funeral was very painful. Jude was not Catholic. In fact, he was pretty much the most vocally non-Catholic person you could imagine. But our society takes it as a given that if you are survived by blood family, they organize your funeral, which means they control how you are memorialized. What parts of you are acceptable for the slideshow at the funeral home? Only photos from earlier years, before he let his hair grow out. Only photos of him as a kid. A different Jude. The Mass was held on a Saturday morning in late November. The priest kept saying, "He lived and died in Christ." He also said, "Life is like meatloaf. Love and grief, like ketchup and flour, are inseparable." Why meatloaf? Why not, like, a cake? Everything about the funeral felt off. It was very religious. It was very conservative. It felt like they weren't talking about Jude at all. Just like the general concept of death and how it's okay because heaven anyway, etc. Or when they were talking about Jude, it was a different Jude, a different person, someone who was Catholic and straight-laced conservative. There is nothing like being misremembered in death. And the world, inside out and gray, kept turning. Work continued. A new season came around. The canceled play was revived. There were some readings to do, a few poetry publications, a band to record some overdubs for. People were asking about the next address book, Cadenza, which was at a friend's studio in January of 25. And then there was the next one, Commercial, in March in an office building after dark, where a play Jude wrote was performed. And the summer came around and there was Fairy Garden to think about at a friend's house outside Homedale. There was a tour to do and a soundtrack to compose and an offer to contribute a piece to a gallery show with the Eco-Geoglyphic Observatory and Eco Art Collective. And the world, inside out and gray, kept turning. During this time, Matt was increasingly interested in maps. This was because he had a very high exposure rate to maps working for the Ada County Recorder's Office. If you're not familiar, the Recorder's Office is the government function that handles public archival of all land ownership, surveying, and sale documents. One of his functions as a clerk there was handling the recording or public archival of plat maps. A plat map shows the individual blocks and lots in a subdivision, as well as designations of roads, common areas, access points for emergency services, and public utilities. So basically, he was spending a lot of time looking at detailed maps of Boise and its surrounds. Matt lived in Boise, or its surrounds, for most of his life, but not actually all that consistently. He was born elsewhere and lived in 4 other states and 1 other country over the course of his life, but something about Boise stuck. For Matt, place and memory were pretty much synonymous, especially in a city like Boise, which is building on top of itself at such an incredible rate. He saw that in its constant construction and rapid outward expansion, but also in the dense social networks that grow best in small cities. Matt often experienced walking downtown as walking through a physical fog of memory, a kind kind of invisible weighted air. Within a few blocks of the office where he worked, you could get to his old high school, a theater he'd worked, performed, and taken classes in, another building he performed in, 2 other old jobs, the apartment of a friend who would later become his surviving partner, an apartment where his mom lived, in which is coincidentally a building 2 of his ex's friends live in, also the building where his ex lives, and a parking lot where he once witnessed a police shooting. It sometimes felt to him like memory was a burying layer over the city. So he started collaging again. Pieces of plat maps and surveys, roads that looked like rivers, places out of scale between tangible land and memory real estate. The problem with maps is what a cartographer can include on them. A surveyor working for the county or a development company is not going to include killdeer nests, interesting bits of scrub brush, found desert junk. They're not going to include their impressions or memories of the land or anybody else's. A map that includes every detail of the territory it represents would have to be the size of the territory. In June 2025, Matt completed the installation for a large-scale map collage called Immortal Fleeting Land at Maine with the Ecogeoglyphic Observatory in an exhibition called Riparian. Immortal Fleeting Land was Matt's personal psychogeographical map, an imagined version of the Boise area that saw place as malleable in the service of memory. No one remembers objectively. How many times have you passed a construction site and thought, what was there before? Or found out the distance between 2 places you've been is much longer or shorter than you remember? The pieces of a city stand out brighter, clearer, and bigger in relation to how well the rememberer knows them. Matt's Boise was ruled by childhood homes, old jobs, friends' houses, galleries and theaters, various artistic and social haunts, a certain parking lot, a cemetery. Street corners he had important conversations on, walks home, favorite bars, secret river spots, roads, parking garages, garden centers, parks, and cul-de-sacs. This was the Boise that Matt remembered as he lived in it. So, there was the intersection of memory and land. But what about memory and community? Those dense, small city social networks. He had not stopped thinking about Jude's funeral, and particularly the strange people who would come out of the woodwork there. Friends who had come from other states, even from Germany, and friends expected to come from nearby who hadn't turned up. There were the people from high school who had lost track of Jude since then. There were the people he worked with on 1 or 2 plays. There was the sudden re-exertion of control from family who hadn't spoken to him in years. There was the way church figures talked about him, the misimagination of him in death. When we die, we come to exist only in other people, in a fragmented state, but also in a collapsed state. When someone dies, your relationship to that person changes from a linear one. First we were acquaintances, then we were friends, then we were partners, then we were exes, etc., to a stacked one. You feel everything you ever felt for that person at once. A ghost is a strangely 3-dimensional thing. Matt became increasingly fascinated by the ways people he knew each other. He started compulsively drawing little maps about this, like flowcharts, like conspiracy theory boards. Well, I met A through B, well, I met through C, but B met A through D, who had dated A's sister E. Iteration by iteration, the map settled into its parameters. Not just everyone Matt knew, specifically people who might come to his funeral, who were the close friends and collaborators, who would give the eulogy, who would show up from old jobs, high school, even earlier than that. What about estranged family? What about former friends, exes? 130 people who may come to my funeral was, in an earlier iteration, roughly 57 people who may come to my funeral. Matt started conducting interviews and surveys of people on the map, asking person by person if and how everyone knew everyone else. At the end of each interview, he asked who else the interview subject might invite, expect to see there, bring along with them. A lot of people at funerals are not mourners. They're the people who are there to support the mourners. 57 people turned into 80 people, turned into 100 people, turned into 115, turned into 130. When the maps on paper got too big and too detailed to make out the lines, he started playing with twine, yarn, string, pins, eventually fine sewing thread and needles. One nail for one person, one thread between nails for a relationship or connection. He replaced names with numbers so that interview subjects could have anonymity and be more honest than they otherwise might. The map grew and grew. When one wall was not enough, he expanded to working on the ceiling, trailing down onto two walls. The map took on shape. A ghost is a strangely three-dimensional thing. When he got into the show and tell residency at the Commonwealth, here it was, a bigger canvas. Dedicated space and time and resources for the map, an organism growing on its own in need of greater sustenance. It really does take a village. 50 interviews and surveys across the map yielded over 1,000 connections. The map split to crossing a whole room between four walls, thousands of strings, thousands and thousands of intersections, vertices. 29 and 97 are good friends who met through an artist residency. 7 briefly attended a house show at 17's house where they met. 8 sees 41 at 41's retail job. 79 and 83 went to elementary school together. 54 and 24 have been a couple for 4 years. 36 and 83 are frequent artistic collaborators. 2 and 39 are brothers. 51 and 52 are divorced. 125 and 21 collaborated on a music project in 2008 and haven't seen each other since. 48 used to work at a coffee shop. 16 used to go to Wright in the early 2000s. They are now coincidentally neighbors. This list of connections, read directly through, is 4 hours long. The map became something that happened in the air, something that cuts through a room, something almost claustrophobic, a spider web, physicalized memory strands in a funeral parlor, a strangely three-dimensional thing, the emergent phenomenon of community. Matt's wake is set for March 27th, 2026 at the Commonwealth. Drop in from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. to tape a memorial message. Fingers crossed, we get 130 people on tape. Thank you. It's time for questions if anyone has any. Yeah.
What were surprising about the connections that you found?
The question is, what was surprising about the connections Matt found? I think a lot of them are just like really obscure. Like a lot of people have like very, very strange connections in a city this size, especially between people who live here for a long time. You get these really interesting like overlapping relationships where people have these kind of connections where it's like, you know, well, we originally met in one capacity, like a coffee shop one, like, oh, that's so funny, like I used to go to the cafe where this person worked, and I used to write there when I was in college, and then like later we had like mutual friends, and then like later than that we became neighbors, and so you have these like continuous loops of re-meeting people and relationships that have like many phases over a long time, which I think is really fascinating. Yeah.
What's the story behind the 2 people who had no connection for the other 120 people?
Oh yeah. So the piece is just down the hall here in this little room, if you haven't seen it, and there are two nails on the wall that are only connected to each other. And so the question was, what's the deal with those people? I feel like if I give it away, it's going to be less interesting. I think that the mystery is better because you can project anything you want onto it. The truth is like quite boring. So yeah.
Can you talk about the white thread?
Yeah. In the piece, it's almost entirely red threads, like thousands of red threads between people, and there is a little bit of white thread as well that goes through it. So the question was, can you talk about the white thread? And the white are for two people who were included in the map who have died. And I felt that including their connections is an important part of community, an important part of collective memory keeping, which I think is what memorials are about. And so it felt relevant to me to represent them in some way because of the way that a dead person's connections continue to exist without them. Yeah, Ken.
I want to ask about your next project, and I wonder if your next project is going to be to look at the same connections, but in an ant colony.
Yeah, for anyone who didn't hear that, the question was, in your next project, are you going to look at the same kinds of connections in an ant colony? Which is a great idea. What I would love to do is model somebody else's funeral. I would love to just like totally insert myself into someone else's life. Like, give me a list of everyone you know, contact details. I think it would be really fascinating to be like a totally outside observer and try to get at the connections that people might not, say to you if you are the center point.
On that, looking back at the methodology, is there anything you'd change? Doing it again or doing someone else's funeral?
Yeah. The question is, looking back at the methodology, is there anything you would change, or what would you change if you did somebody else's funeral? Which is a good question. I definitely have like specific craft perspective things that I would do differently in terms of like the way that I placed the nails made it really hard for me to reach some of the top ones that I had to like kind of like crawl into the web to be like, oh, I forgot to get that guy. And so next time I would do like my patterning differently and a lot of things like that. And then I also think, and I developed my style of interviewing for connections kind of gradually throughout the process, so that the first people I talked to got like a very general, like, tell me about your relationship with this person question, and after that it became a lot more structured and specifically worded, in which it became, I like realized, oh, you need to ask for the story of a person's relationship. How did you meet? What was the point at which your relationship developed? Event-based relationship storytelling, which is where you get the really interesting connections. So if I was gonna do it again, I would love to expand and interview more people and go back to interview people who I had kind of more loosely formed interviews with. Yeah, Claire.
So you were talking about like how the process changed in collecting the connections and stories. How did it like feel emotionally in the beginning to be collecting these connections versus how has it changed in like the end of how do you feel holding all of this?
That's a good question. The question is based on the change between the beginning and the end of the process. How has it felt to hold all of the information and collect that? I don't know. I think like it's the kind of thing that I have just spent years obsessively thinking about. And so the interesting things for me have been like, these people who I didn't even know knew each other are like close friends, and like that kind of stuff. Also, like you get these like kind of weird insights, like when in the process of installing, a lot of people came in and very kindly helped me, and hearing other people's observations about like, oh, this person has a lot of connections to like different groups of people. This person is like connected in a specific way a lot. Like that was really an interesting lens to see the project through, like other people's seen patterns in the data that I'm too close to. So I think it'd be really interesting to continue to like step back from that and look for more overarching kind of data patterns. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah.
How has the project shifted your relationship to Boise or your sense of like Boise haunting?
Yeah, how has the project shaped my relationship to Boise? Click on
And
photos.
or your own death?
And my own
Take
death.
both or one.
Yeah, okay. I don't know. I mean, I think it would be really interesting to do something looking at like physicalizing the relationships in a similar way to previous work of like looking at like memory locations as a next step would be really interesting. I would love to have like a pinned map of like this is where we get into like creepy conspiracy board territory, but like a map in which I have like everybody's homes pinned and working. These people met at this location, you know. It could be a disturbing energy. But I don't know. I mean, I think that it's given me a different kind of love for like odd locations in Boise, like weird, like a lot of people were like, oh, I see that person at the co-op, which is somewhere that like I never go. So it's, I don't know, it's interesting to see like, oh, there are all these like important locations that are kind of outside of my direct vision, but are really populated in the periphery. I don't know, yeah. How am I doing on time? One more question. Okay. Last question. Yeah. Hey.
You mentioned the shape of like a ghost a couple of times in the talk, and I wonder if you have anything to say about Matt's ghost. The shape of Matt's ghost.
Oh, like what would the shape of my ghost be? That's a great question. I don't know that I have a great answer for you. I mean, I think that like I don't personally believe in literal ghosts in the sense of like something that is semi-corporeal. What I'm interested in is really is fractured memory in the way that different people hold different parts of a person who has died. And so I think that all ghosts are fractured into many, many, many pieces, and each piece is a different size and shape and held by one person. Like I think that's the real disintegration of death beyond the disintegration of the physical body is the fracturing of a self, that there is no longer a single self, and there is just many iterations of greater and lesser depth and coloring. Thanks very much, everybody.